The Companies Act of 2013 is probably a very great innovation. Company is no more bounded by a single person or by a single entity altogether. It's a separate factor. A company is not being given through a birth or something. It is created. It is created as a structure. It is created as an entity. Only in private companies, the transferability of shares is restricted. Good morning and welcome to the second session of company law, and this is a very interesting session where we are going to speak about the features of the company. In the previous session, we were talking about what is a company, what is the definition that is behind a company. Now, in this session, we are going to talk about the features, which is a very important factor. Now, moving forward, let's try to understand the change that is happening in the modern world, in the modern context altogether. Nowadays, what is happening here is that there is a drastic change both in the international and the national landscape, where government is trying to rephrase the company. They're trying to rearrange the sectors altogether. So there is a need for a dynamic law system, a legal system that has to come, which is able to understand and make it forward. So that's why the Companies Act of 1956 got a complete facelift altogether, with the Companies Act of 2013 coming in, trying to understand the various factors, the various needs that a company has to undergo so that they can bring in a better facelift to the organization altogether. Now, if you see here in India, we are trying to make up more contemporary laws. We are coming up with more better systems altogether that can make the company even more accessible, flexible, giving out a better image, giving out a better transparency and the ethics as far as the business is concerned. So what we are doing here is that we are trying to make the company more meaningful. So that's why I would say that the Companies Act of 2013 is probably a very great innovation that has been made in terms of understanding the company law. Now moving forward, let's understand the features of the company. The first feature of a company is the separate legal entity. One of the most distinctive factors of company is that it is separate as compared to organization. It acquires a unique character of being a separate legal entity. So when you are talking about the company, you are talking only about the company and you are not going to talk about any other factors put together. So what does it mean for us is that it is a separate personality by itself. The company is a separate legal entity. It's a separate personality by itself, which has all the rights, all the powers of an individual. So just like a human being is a company. So that's why sometimes we feel that is the company is also having a life? Is the company also having a separate factor? It's a separate, entity or an organism by itself. Definitely, yes, it is a separate legal entity. It has its own factors, powers, and the relative features altogether. So the existence of a company is distinct and separate from that of it resembles. So that is where it becomes a very important thing altogether. A company might be created, might be registered somewhere, it might have its head office somewhere. So the company's origination, the way of working, the company's operations are entirely different. The company might look towards you in a particular logo, in a particular way, or in a particular style, but the way it works is again entirely different from how it is being created. So for example, the company itself can have its own property, it can have its own bank account, it can raise loans, it can incur liabilities for itself and enter into contracts. So which means to say that according to the law, altogether it is different from the subscribers to the memorandum of association. Now you will be able to understand and appreciate the factor that company is no more bounded by a single person or by a single entity altogether. It's a separate factor. It will have its own bank account. So sometimes when you are getting paid by the company, your salary will come from the company accounts and not from a personal account altogether. When the company is giving you some sort of remuneration, it is coming again from the company's account. When the company is getting into a contract with another company, then it is a entity to another legal entity. When company is borrowing loan from the bank, it is a loan that is taken on the company, not on the individual personality altogether. The company can raise money from the share market. Again, it is on the name of the company, not on the legal entity altogether. That is not on some persons altogether. So when you start understanding this concept, understanding this feature completely, you will be able to appreciate this factor that company has got exactly the same feature like how the other human beings also have. Moving forward, we are talking about the perpetual succession. That matters a lot today. When you start looking into this graph or the diagram that I have put here, that itself is quite interesting for all of us to understand who is going to lead the company. So this is always a very, very interesting question. Now, recently, there was a very beautiful article that was written about the HDFC Bank CEO, the outgoing CEO. In fact, he has completed his tenure in the month of October. It was about the great legendary banker named Aditya Puri. This person has been with the HDFC Bank for almost 3 decades, and he has made this bank reach great heights. Scalable heights, which are something really fantastic when it comes to benchmarking in the banking industry itself. Started as a private bank in the year September 1994. From there till 2020 October, Aditya Puri has definitely been on the helm of the bank, trying to make it as the most respected bank in the private sector as far as possible. Today, HDFC has got a market capital of more than 8 lakh crores altogether, and they have been doing a fantastic job as a banking entity altogether. Now, what has been the journey? What has been the factor? These are all the business management story. But after Aditya Puri leaving the roles of the MD and CEO of the bank, has the bank come to an end? Definitely not. They have identified a person who's going to lead it, and already that person is into the place, and he is going to take the next level of the banking altogether. What does it mean for us? That means to say that company lives forever. Companies will not die as the CEO moves away or as the top management changes, which means to say that there's always a perpetual succession that comes into picture. Companies tend to live forever. Only the CEOs and the chairmen will keep changing. The chair changes, but the structure does not, the entity does not change altogether. Because let us try to understand, when the organization was created, it was created with an intention, with a factor that the business will continue to survive as long as possible. So with the death or with the change of its member, it is not going to stop. What is going to happen is that new people are going to come in, and they are going to take over the company, and they will run the company like it is their own. So what is going to happen is that new faces are going to come, new management style, new structures, new policies, new regulations will come, but the company is never going to come to an end. So that is why we say that further, what is going to happen even is that the shares of the company will change hands infinitely, but that does not affect the existence of the company. Now, starting from September 94 onwards till 2020, number of people who have bought an HDFC Bank share and who have kept on changing are infinite in nature. Why? Because they have invested, they have seen the growth to such a great extent as far as possible. But definitely that doesn't mean the end of the growth or end of the scenario at any point of time. They have seen it growing for quite a long time altogether, and they have also seen the existence of the company as a great entity altogether. So that's how I would say that though the members might change, the shareholders might change, even the person who is involved in the activity might change, but then the company will not change, will not continue to stay for in terms of any changes affecting it. It will continue to live as a separate entity. Followed by, in simple words, it's an artificial person that has been brought into existence by the legal formation, by a legal law altogether. Hence, it can be ended by law alone and not by its member. So what is a death of a company? I'm not talking about a death of a partner, but if you're going to talk about a death of a company, if the company is going to be dissolved, if the company needs to be closed completely, if the company has to be moved out of the scenario, then what it can be done only by the legal provisions and not by individual people. So tomorrow, if there is something unfortunate happening in the company, a loss, or there's going to be a lockout, or there's going to be a scenario when companies are going to break down, that is possible only because of the law provisions, and suddenly one person or one member cannot decide the closure of the company. So that is very, very important as what we see in perpetual succession. Moving forward, we are going to talk about the artificial legal person. Legal because the creation of law. That's where I'm trying to talk about. Artificial because it's a creation of process other than the natural birth. Company is not being given through a birth or something. It is created. It is created as a structure. It is created as an entity. It is not through the natural birth process. So that's why we call it as artificial. We call it legal because it is created by the action of law. So that's why I'm using the word legal. Person because it has the similar rights of a human being. So that's why we call it as a artificial legal person. So just like a person, just like a human being, it has all the rights, it has all the powers, it has all the factors taken into account. Further, as I have already discussed and I have told you, like any other human being, the bank will also have its own property documents, will have its own accounts, will have its own cash, ability to come into contracts. It can be able to do all kind of activities, except for the factor that, as I have told you, it is not going to get into a human being life altogether. Apart from that, all the commercial transactions, all the activities can also be done by the company itself. So that's why we call it as a artificial legal personality by itself. Followed by the factor that since a company is an artificial person, it needs humans to function. So that is very, very important here. The company will not be able to function by itself. You need a lot of human beings. You need a lot of human resources who are going to come inside the company, who are going to work as directors, who are going to work as workers, who are going to work as people in different roles and responsibilities, who are going to create this functionality altogether. So that's why I would always say that the company is not a separate entity just floating in the air, but company consists of human beings who are going to work for the company, who are going to create a dedicated workforce, who are going to lead the company by examples and take it forward to the next level as far as possible. So this is very, very important, very, very interesting at this juncture that the company and the workforce are integrated, but yet they are separate entity. Followed by the next factor, limited company. What is the word called as limited here, sir? Why? Because these days people are talking about unlimited offers, unlimited usage of data plan. So everything is getting on unlimited. But still here we are talking about limited liability altogether. What is it all about? One of the most important features of a company is limited liabilities of the members. That means to say that the liability of a member depends on the type of the company. What do you mean by limited liability? The debts of the company in totality do not become the debts of its shareholders. The shareholder's debt is limited only to the number of shares he or she is holding in the company. The entire liability of the company will not fall on a shareholder. Why? Because let's say that I am holding 10 shares of Tata Steel. 20 shares of Tata Motors or 50 shares of Sun Pharma, that means my liability of the company or the liability of the company towards that shareholder is only to that extent, not to the entire liability altogether. So whatever happens here, the liability factor is limited to the number of shares we are holding, not to the entire amount of shares. This is a very, very important concept. Why? Because the ideology of the company here is that the nominal value of the shares that is held by them, to that matter only you are extended for the liability. Tomorrow if the company shut down or there is a loss that is happening altogether here, that means you are liable only to the factor, to the level at which it has happened. It is not to the extent of the entire company coming into picture or the entire liability falling on your head. So that's why the shareholders cannot be asked to pay more than the unpaid value of the shares. Which means if you are subscribing for 30 shares or 50 shares or 100 shares of a particular company, you are going to pay the value up to that extent only and not to the entire amount of the IPO that is going to be launched. So it is a very, very important concept that has to sink inside, where we are talking about only the limited liability factor. Similarly, in case the company is limited by guarantee, that means the members here are liable only to the extent of amount that is guaranteed by them. So if the company goes ahead and guarantees to its member that yes sir, you will be repaid back to this amount of money at the day of ending, at the day of dissolution of the company, that means the members will be guaranteed only to the extent what the company has been promised, beyond which the liability will not be paid. So further, this liability arises only when the company goes into liquidation. So we are going to talk about this case or scenario only if liquidation or dissolution happens. But in the worst case scenario, if there is going to be a liquidation or liability extension coming into picture, you will be guaranteed by the company only to the extent what it has promised to you. Further, if it is an unlimited company, then the liability of the members is unlimited, but such instances are very, very rare. Why? Because these days we are not talking about unlimited companies at all. So this is just a theoretical assumption that I would like to draw upon here, saying that there are unlimited companies. Actually speaking, there is no unlimited company at all. We are only going by the limited company or by the guarantee. Even these days, guarantee is also coming down. There is not much of companies in guarantee. We only have limited liabilities companies that exist in the market. Moving forward, let me talk about the common seal of the company. This is very, very interesting. Why? Because the seal, sign and authority is a very, very interesting factor for human beings. Who can use the seal, sir? Will the company come by itself and seal it? Will the company itself will put its own signature? The answer is yes and no also. Why? Because let me tell you in this way. While a company is an artificial person and works through an agency of human beings, it has an official signature. That means on the behalf of company, a responsible person can sign on the papers, but definitely company will have its own seal and signature. That means to say that company is being affixed with a seal, with a stamp altogether. This is affixed by the officers and employees of the company on all documents. So the signature will be done by the CEO, by the CFO, by the COO. So they have an official seal and signature that comes into picture. This official signature is the common seal. So when you are stamping on the paper with a complete seal of the company, now that is something which is official in nature. There are designated employees from the organization who will be given the permission to sign across on the board. So that is why we say, when we talk about the official seal and signature, yes, the company will have its own identity, logo and factors, but then on the top of it, they will get the seal, they will get the signature done by the respective people who are there as a part of the company. Followed by which, in the year 2015, there was an amendment to this act which was talking about the common seal option. In section 9 of the act, we say that it does not have a phrase and a common seal in it. This provides an alternative mode of authorization for companies who do not wish to have a common seal. So the section 9 was talking about this factor, saying that suppose the company does not have a common seal, does not have a common picture in nature, you can take an alternative mode of authorizing the company's activities and factor, wherein a person's name or signature can be done on the behalf of the company. Followed by the transferability of shares. Today, if I have 1 lakh shares of Tata Motors or Tata Steel or Reliance or Infosys or Tech Mahindra or HCL companies, can I transfer it to the name of my friend or to my relative or to my wife or to my sister or brother, whatever is that? Generally, yes. The answer is yes. You are in a position to transfer the company shares freely, though there might be certain restriction imposed, but then the transferability of shares is completely accepted as a part and parcel of the feature. So what you can do here is that you can transfer the shares as per your will and wish, provided if there are certain terms and conditions which are exclusively told by the company. But in general, it is not like that. Only in private companies, the transferability of shares is restricted. It can be done only at a particular level. You cannot transfer the shares. But if there are any protections or preconditions put in, then the security comes into picture, or else you can just transfer the shares as per your will and wish. So that is why these days what happens is that when the allotment of the shares is happening, you can nominate, in case of anything happening to you, you can nominate the nominee's name and you can say that the shares value can be transferred to that particular person. In the section 56 of the Companies Act 2013, very, very important, please underline it. It's the section 56 of the Companies Act 2013, which provides that transfers of shares of the company and other securities will be registered by a company. An acknowledgement will be made, a registration will be made by the company only when the proper instrument of transfer is being done as per the regulation, the share transfer form, which is given by the number SH4. So unless and until the share transfer form is being completely filled by the shareholder and all the transfer formalities and documentation is completed, the share transfer will not be completed. So you have to go through the proper documentation process. You have to give out your eligibility, confirmation, all those factors saying that I am going to transfer my shares to this particular person and it has been acknowledged by the company, completely registered by the company, then only the transferability of share is possible. With this, I come to the end of this session. I hope and believe that all the information provided here is of a great help and resource to you. So in this session, we have talked about the features of the company, which is very, very essential for you, both from the examination standpoint as well as from the theoretical concept standpoint. In the next session, we will be talking about the different types of company, what are their factors and how they are formed. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me on this wonderful session.